guys, thanks for joining us for introducing the Zoom Room's native control. Yeah, all right. I'm thankful for your excitement. I am very excited too as well because this is a feature that has been dear in my heart for the last, I would say like 2-3 years. So let's get started. My name is JJ. Here's Nick. He's actually my manager, and I think he's networking out there somewhere. But yeah, I'm a solutions architect for Zoom. Well, what that means is we help come up with standards for our designs, Zoom Rooms designs, and this feature has been a hard request that we have been asking the product team to develop for the last few years. So before we introduce native control, let's talk about why we need native, why Zoom decided to build this into our product. So as you can see up here, traditional AV systems consist of, maybe we broke it down into 7 different silos. The first silo is PSTN dialing. That's your Zoom, that's your phone system tying into your audio. Second is wireless content. This is AirPlay, any sort of wirelessly sharing devices. Third is video communications. And traditionally, Zoom would have fit only in this segment. As you think about Polycom's VTC or Cisco VTC devices, they all fit in this silo of the traditional AV system. Then you have wired content sharing. That's your HDMI sharing or VGA sharing. You have session recording, so you generally have a separate recorder that gets triggered to record every time a meeting starts. And then last thing to tie all of this together is controls. So basically from your Crestron or Extron or AMX devices, you need to be able to talk to all of these different silos and make sure you tie them all together within the control system. And depending on your programmer, every user interface for all of your conference rooms will be different. And also, it might be user intuitive. Some of it might be too complex for users to use. How many of you guys had experience of using a Crestron touch panel where you're like, where is switching? Yeah, like, you don't know because every controller is different, right? So last but not least, 7 is additional complexity that you might not see here, such as lighting control, such as projector control, and things like that. So let's talk about Zoom Rooms. Let's talk about how Zoom thinks about all of these different silos. When it comes to silo 1, we have Zoom Phone. When it comes to silo 2 for wireless share, we have proximity share, which is that 5th button on your Zoom desktop app where you one-click share into Zoom Rooms. Then you have, obviously, your Zoom video conferencing. Then you have HDMI share. You can directly tie into Zoom Room machine. Then you have recording baked directly into Zoom. Then you have your universal Zoom Room controller app that stays the same no matter which room you go. Then we have this new release that we will talk about. So to sum it up, instead of thinking about it in silos and trying to put Zoom Rooms into one silo, think of us as an entire AV system. So another comparison is traditionally, on the left here, we have all of the conference room equipment that typically goes into a conference room, and obviously a Crestron device to somehow RS-232 them, IR them together so that they work together. On the right, what we're aiming for is a very simple software-based unified communication experience where CPU is driving everything and all of the device displays are just connected directly to the CPU. The controller and scheduler is connecting through the internet. We're already doing some of the native control natively. So as you guys know, multi-camera Zoom Rooms, so you can connect up to multiple cameras. Traditionally, how you did this was it was an HDMI input individually from the cameras. You feed it into the video matrix. You control it somehow, and then you spit back out one signal into your Cisco or Polycom codec. But now you plug all of the cameras directly into the Mac Mini, and you're able to control all of that without any additional programming. We also have multiple content share. So again, before you had to have a programmer, you had HDMI input 1, HDMI input 2. You wanted to show both, then you have to send HDMI input 1 to display 1, HDMI input 2 to display 2, whereas now everything is baked into Zoom Rooms altogether. So let's talk about current solutions. So how do we tackle how do we tackle control currently? So Crestron has kind of done a spin-off of using our CS API using Zoom Rooms. So what you see here is actually not the Zoom's native iOS or Android app. What it is Crestron has basically created a similar user interface, but every button they push, they're actually calling an API into Zoom Rooms. Another solution that AMX has suggested was a windowed Android version. So it's like picture-in-picture. So it is running our native Android app on the left side, but on the right side, what you see is the different control options you may need. And then last but not least, Crestron has done a flip mode of it. So what it is that when you click on this arrow buttons, it will flip back and forth between the Zoom native app that's running on Android to a controller surface that you would recognize as your regular Crestron controller. So this is a setting where you can have it only as Zoom Room, and then you can have it flip back to the Zoom Room after it times out after 5 minutes or so. So this is what it looks like currently. As you can tell, it adds a lot of complexity to the setup. Not only the setup, not only the programming, but it adds a lot of complexity to your networking needs. And this is what we're introducing today, where from a single Zoom Mac Mini and all of the devices that are controlled over network, you are able to communicate directly through them if they are such as IP displays that have Ethernet directly built into them. You can talk to them directly. Some of the legacy devices, such as the lighting, the projector screen, and the projector, where it may not have an IP control directly baked in, you will have a conversion box. We've worked together with Global Cache to pass IP control and convert them into IR signals, relay signals, RS-232 signals, and whatever you name it. So let's take a look at the user interface of what this looks like natively within Zoom Room control interface. So first, this is your familiar Zoom Room controller app. And something you notice here is you have a room controller button. When you press on that, you have a list of all your devices that you will program beforehand, and you'll have on and off buttons, and then you'll just press one of them. How you set this up on the web interface? Easy. So under your Zoom Room admin portal, under devices, now you'll see room control toggle. And when you toggle that on, you see a create a profile button. When you press that button, you'll get a pop-up with a couple of lines. And you populate this with your JSON code. And with that, this is something that, this is the actual code that's running here at the Zoom Room today. And you save it, and you're done. So let's kind of see how that works. So can we have the iPad up on the projector, please? So again, your familiar Zoom Room controller app. When you go to room controls, you have different things you can control. So let's turn on the Tubi for a second. And now we have a Tubi. And you can turn it off. Another thing you can control is air conditioning. So as you can see up on the stage with these fans, You can control that those fans on and off. And then here I also have happy hour music. When I turn that on, we have happy hour music playing. And then while we're at it, let's also control the lights so that we can create the party mode. All right, we'll save the party for Snoop Dogg. Thanks for the lights. I'm gonna actually turn that off now. What do you guys think? All right, so can we have the PowerPoint back up on the stage, please? So let's talk about potential use cases. Now since I've described the tool you guys can use, now I'm sure you guys are thinking about how can I use this in a commercial or in your corporate environment. So let's take a look at a training room for an example. What you see here is currently, let's identify some of the things that traditionally we need to control. So as you can tell, there's a projector. So projector needs control, right? And then this screen, I can't really tell if that's permanently baked in or not, but it could be a projector screen that you might have to use relay to bring down and bring up. Also lights, also temperature control, traditionally maybe cameras. What else can you guys think of? Displays, so how to turn on and off displays. So now you can, with Zoom Room native control, you can do all of this natively within Zoom. Are you guys excited? All right. So that's actually it. That's as simple as it gets. So let's take questions. I also have Sam here who's actually programmed this room for us. So if I can't answer your question, he can definitely answer them for you.
Can you talk about the scripting a little bit, or how the modules might work, or for like a basic display or projector?
Yeah, so I'll actually turn this over to Sam. Well, Sam, why don't you come on stage for us?
Yeah, so with the scripting, we try to keep it as generic as possible so that it encompasses as many devices as possible. What I didn't want to do is focus on a couple specific devices and constantly be following the battle of trying to chase which devices you guys need to control. So the way it works is very generically. At the moment, these are actually just literally, it's called a generic network device driver in the code. It's a JSON file that allows you to fully name, I want to create a device, I want to create a parameter for the device. I'm going to call that, in that case, so like I created a device named room lighting, create a parameter for that called power, and then it has two functions. It has, for some reason, your name and off. As those two devices. And then each of those has a string message attached to it. That driver for the device has in itself an IP address, port, and then whether it's TCP or UDP commands that it needs to see if it needs that handshake going back and forth. And then from there, it sends the string, receive it on the other end. As far as testing at the moment, because this is in beta obviously, but we haven't released it, if you test, there's an application called Packet Sender, available on Mac and Windows. If you use Packet Sender, you can mimic exactly the way this is going to format and see how those strings are coming across and what you need to send.
Any other questions? And by the way, this feature, again, as Sam stated, is in beta, and it's set to release sometime in Q4.
So this might be for either of you. So I hear that the interface is very standardized, but is there any customization, like little icons that we can add to represent a projector or something like that? Oh.
Yes. So there's very little that can be done to it, but there is a little bit. You'll notice that room lighting here has an icon. There's a small set of icons available. Currently, we're kind of figuring out what icons are needed. So if there are examples of icons, that would be a cool thing for us to get from you guys. If there are things that you're like, hey, I need to be able to show this. Like one of the ones on the list right now to add is a game console, because I need to be able to share hardwired from an Xbox in my room, things like that. It is a preset list of icons, And then additionally to that, on here where we have our buttons labeled with on and off, those could also be an icon as well, an up caret, etc. for directionals.
So,
No, the interface itself, and that's where the lack of GUI to it is. The interface itself is going to be this rough look. Is it
Can we
possible
get
to share the
iPad
iPad again
up
real
on the
quick?
stage?
Where it's going to be this rough look where you have device as a row and then lists of parameters below it. There we go. So you have device, room lighting, and then below it you have parameters. You can have as many parameters as you want in there. You can have as many devices. You can also stack like those first 3 devices where it only has 1 parameter, so we've gone ahead and combined it into the single heading. But this is going to be the entirety, at least at this plan point, the entirety of the way the interface lines up.
so in a scenario like you showed with the training room where you have projectors and screens, we don't have a big IT staff. We don't have an AV department. How do I get help? Who do I call to come and be our integrator to put all that together for us? Are there Zoom partners that we go to? Would we go to an AV provider? Do we go to an integrator? What's the support, the implementation mechanism?
So we have the Zoom Certified Integrator Program, zoom.us/integrator, where we have any partners that have already joined our program. That means that they've taken specific Zoom training and in general, know our platform very well. At this point, I would mention that the integrators have been seeing what you guys have been seeing. We talked a lot about it at Infocom. I've talked with a lot of integrators about it, but they don't have any early access to it. So it's going to be a little bit before they kind of wrap their heads around it.
Yeah.
But in addition to finding an integrator from there or bringing any integrator you've used previously, if you have someone who's already done the install for that training room and you just want to, hey, we're stepping to Zoom, we need some extra help with this integration, you can have them email into integrator@zoom.us, and we'd love to get them in on that certified integrator program and give them any help that they need as we roll out these new features.
Yeah. We have questions here.
So did I see it right that you can put more cameras and you can switch from camera to camera in the program?
Yeah, so that portion is an additional feature with Zoom Rooms, but it's already baked into Zoom in the meeting tab. So as you can see here, you can switch cameras, and here we're running a Blackmagic, but typically you will see your different cameras you have up there. And then let's say you switch to a different camera, you can control PTZ directly through it's already baked into Zoom.
So the switch camera button automatically appears if you have more than one USB camera attached to your device.
It's USB cameras. It's not
USB cameras.
Okay, it's not HDMI cameras.
If you were doing HDMI, you would be bringing it in through a capture device. So if I was using, for example, the Magewell capture device, you could have even multiples of those, and in that list, it would show up as Magewell capture device instead of knowing what's attached on the other end of it.
And then if you wanted to control that, then you would program that into the native control.
There's not really a good way. There's not a good way at the moment to do camera control of HDMI cameras that are captured outside of. We do have the ability to use USB RS-232 devices for anything that speaks Visca. What's the camera in specifically?
No, I'm just thinking in general. So if you wanted 4 cameras in your system, one pointing to the whiteboard, one pointing to the moderator, one pointing to the whole group, and maybe one is like a document camera. And you want to go from camera to camera to camera, like a 4-camera broadcast production.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yes.
Absolutely. And there's theoretically no limit on the number of cameras.
And it's got to be limited to what you're putting into your device, right?
Correct.
So if you got a Mac Mini, you can't put 8 cameras in, right?
You could with a USB hub.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if you use a USB hub, then it'll recognize each camera in that hub as a separate camera. It won't recognize it as a USB. You'd think if it went to a hub, it'd be one device, right?
Yeah.
No, because it's one bus, but on that bus, each one is coming across as their own device, and Zoom sees all of them independently.
Yeah.
So there's theoretically no limit. I've personally seen up to 10 cameras with camera switching, and then you can, because you get it in that drop down, if you just had 2, it just alternates. If you have the drop down, you can name the cameras as well. So you could name it whiteboard camera instead of it showing up as Cam 540.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
And for additional camera options, I would visit the Aver booth and the Logitech booth.
So you're recommending USB cameras?
We do. We recommend
Yes.
USB cameras because of the camera control that comes along with it natively.
Yeah.
If you look on our AV design guides on our support site, we have examples of our training rooms that include using those cameras, USB and the USB extenders. We recommend that we've tested a lot and function really well.
And to access the AV design guides, I will leave a handful of these up here. It's a QR code that leads to the AV design guide, so you guys can take one.
Will you have a library of all the scripts at some point, so we're not like constantly inventing the wheel?
Because of the way it's structured, it's a little less like there could be example files for entire setups, but there's a little less ability to have like modules, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What I do expect us to have is some documentation on here's how it's structured, and I also expect us to have several articles that are, hey, here's an example setup where we use a global cache RS-232 box to control this projector. Here's the message, the hex codes that it's sending in its messages. Here's an example of how we did that with a drop-down screen and a projector and control.
Yeah.
If you have this exact setup, paste this whole thing in your room, adjust the IP addresses. Yep.
Or replace strings applicable to
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
That's awesome.
Edit from here. And I think we'll have several different just like example documents of that.
Yeah.
Really, really, really well done, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam has done really a lot of work on this, so I really appreciate Sam
Yeah,
for this.
that feature was I first pitched it 2 years ago at Zoomtopia, and so now we're finally here. It's live.
Quick question for you. In the room controls, can you have a state indicator saying if it's on or off?
There is no feedback in version 1.
Yeah.
So in version 1, it is output only. There are no inputs, and there's no feedback channel. So if you're using a TCP connection, there's technically like, hey, I accepted the packet, but there is no, I sent the power on command to the projector, and it said, I acknowledge that you want me to power on. We're not listening for any of that feedback. That is on the roadmap as we continue to grow it, and at that point, we'd be able to have state command. We'd be able to do polling to see, hey, what input are you on your own, and all of those things.
Yeah.
Just not in the first version.
So you guys, the question is, I guess, obviously it's in beta, so it's kind of raw still. But I mean, were you guys planning on putting like certified devices in there so that we could just pick an LG or certain products, so it'd be easier for a tech to set up those commands?
There are 2 right now.
Okay.
There are 2 specified devices. It's the Global Cache ITAC RS-232 box and the ITAC contact closure box, which is actually what we're doing here with Tubi and everything. Is we're doing a contact closure box, switching relays to power outlets. Yeah. Those 2 devices are done because their messages are a little bit different. There's a little more kind of back and forth. And then if there's any other devices that we see people doing a whole ton of, or we see people that need, like, hey, you need to like send a connect message and then set this message and then that message, and then you can send your actual what I want to do. Things like that, I think we might see that expanding a little bit. For the majority of them, if it's just a simple like, hey, you just need this message there, I think we'll see it more towards example scripts than modules. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there no controls while in a meeting?
Yes.
All right. While in a
there is.
meeting, it's this small button up on the top left,
Oh, okay.
and you can't access it there.
Great.
Yeah.
So is there on the roadmap a possibility of having presets? So let's say you walk into the room and it'll automatically put the screens down and do all of those rather than doing
Yeah.
them independently.
Roadmap, yes. I think there is a little bit. What I don't think you'll see is any form of. I don't think you'll see any form of conditionals from us, and I don't think you'll see really anything with timing. But as far as just like, hey, this happened and stack it, what we do have is a small event system already. In this first version, there's a small event system. So there are 6 events. Meeting start, meeting stop, mic was muted, mic was unmuted, video started, video stopped. And those call your other buttons, which you can also create buttons that are hidden if there's one that I want to call all the time. A good example is like, so I have a 910. I've got MXA 910s up here. So I've got an LED on it. I want it to turn red when it's muted, right? You can create that in external control by having it react to the mute, and then it can send that ping up there, even though the mute button doesn't, or turn light red is not on my room controls page. And when in that event system, you can stack as many as you want.
Yeah.
A good example of that is meeting start. I actually just added it this morning to the studio, the broadcast studio in there. When they start the meeting, it turns the lights on.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. If that's all. Thanks guys for coming. And I hope you guys can use this tool to control your rooms more effectively. So thanks for coming, guys.